The morning started quieter than most. Captain Ron Mercer sat in the corner of the apparatus bay, nursing a cup of black coffee while the overhead doors were still halfway open, letting in the cool air that drifted off the river. He had 2 shifts left, this one and tomorrow's, and the number felt unreal after 35 years of alarms, midnight wake-ups, and smoke that settled into the creases of his gear no matter how often he scrubbed it. The younger guys moved around him, checking off tools on the morning sheets. Ron watched without hovering. He didn't need to. They were a solid crew, disciplined, the kind you didn't worry about when things went bad. He'd spent most of the last decade teaching firefighters who'd never known the era before thermal cameras or lightweight construction. They still looked to him for the quiet nod that meant they were doing things right. His Lieutenant Maria Shaw ducked under the rear compartment door of Engine 14 and closed it with a hip bump. She glanced over at him. "You realize you're 1 shift away from being a free man," she said. Ron raised his cup. "Working hard at it." "You know we're doing something for you tomorrow night," he groaned. "Just keep it small. I don't need speeches." Maria smiled. "We'll see." A call for a minor medical run came in mid-morning, nothing dramatic. A guy twisted his ankle at a job site. They loaded him into the ambulance, cleared the scene, and returned to the station. Ron didn't mind the easy pace. Retirement had been creeping into his thoughts more than he expected. He wasn't excited exactly, more unsettled, like stepping out of turnout gear and not knowing where to put your hands. Lunch was leftover chili from the night crew. The crew sat around the table, trading stories, razzing each other in the familiar rhythm of a station that had lived through a lot together. Ron mostly listened. He liked hearing them carry on. It made the place feel steady. Then, just after they wiped the counters and set the dishes in the sink, the tones dropped. "Engine 14, Battalion 3, respond to reported structure fire. 2900 block, Riverside Industrial. Smoke showing from an abandoned plastics warehouse. Possible squatters inside." Ron grabbed the radio off the charger and clipped it to his coat as he walked to the bay. The others were right behind him. He didn't feel the usual jolt that came with fire calls. It felt routine. An old warehouse, probably another small fire caused by someone trying to stay warm. But as the engine rolled out, siren echoing across the industrial buildings, he noticed the column of smoke from several blocks away. Dark, thick, pushing hard. "That's moving," Maria said from the officer's seat, studying the plume. Ron didn't answer. He felt it too. Something was off. They arrived to find the warehouse sitting back from the road behind a chain-link fence that sagged in spots. The place had boarded windows, graffiti, piles of trash near the loading dock. But the smoke told a different story, heavy and churning out of a gap in the roof with flashes of flame licking underneath. 2 workers from a nearby scrapyard waved them down, shouting that someone might have gone inside earlier, maybe a couple of teenagers who sometimes hung around. Ron stepped off the engine and felt heat on his face even from outside the fence line. The fire was growing fast in the center of the building. Lightweight roof, old support beams, a bad mix. He turned to the crew. "All right, we're going interior long enough to do a primary. Stay tight, watch the conditions. If it shifts, we're out." Maria nodded and relayed assignments, her voice steady. The team masked up. Air hissed. Gloves snapped into place. Ron felt that odd calm fall over him, the shift that always happened before entry, the one that pushed everything else aside. They forced a side door that groaned and gave, revealing a corridor choked with smoke. Heat washed out as if someone opened an oven. Ron led with the thermal camera, sweeping beams, crates, and broken shelving. Visibility was nearly zero. "Engine 14 entering the Bravo side," Maria transmitted. "Beginning primary." They moved low, steady, methodical. The fire seemed to be somewhere deeper, toward the center of the structure. Ron heard it, the distant roar, the kind that meant open fuel and fast spread. A faint sound cut through his headset, a cough, or maybe just the building shifting. He paused, listening harder. There it was again, weak but human. "Left side," Ron said. "Someone's in here." He didn't wait for a vote. He pushed forward, hand on the wall, the younger firefighter behind him mirroring every move. The heat picked up sharply. the kind of rise you didn't ignore. "Cap," Maria said. "Conditions aren't good." "I know, just another 30 feet. The sound came again, short, ragged. Probably a kid, maybe unconscious. The smoke thickened until even the thermal camera struggled. The floor felt unsteady under Ron's boots. He slowed, testing each step. Then something cracked deep in the building. A low, rolling pop that didn't belong to normal fire behavior. Ron stopped cold. "Everyone hold," the building answered with a groan that vibrated through the walls. The situation had just changed, and they all knew it. The groan rolled through the structure like a warning from under the floor. Ron felt it in his boots more than he heard it. The younger firefighter behind him, Dylan, fresh out of probation, froze mid-step. Maria keyed up over the radio. "Command from Engine 14 Interior. Building shifting. We're getting out." Before Ron could answer, the faint cough came again. Close, off to the left behind a row of collapsed shelving. He turned his head toward the sound. "We've got a live one, 10 feet, maybe less." Maria didn't argue. She trusted his instincts, even when they made her nervous. They advanced as the heat climbed from uncomfortable to punishing. The smoke had that brown tint that meant plastics were burning deep. Toxic, fast-moving. Not a place you lingered. Ron swept the thermal camera. Through the haze of whiteout image, a blue blob flickered. Small, curled up near what looked like a fallen support beam. "There," he said. "We're taking them." Dylan moved forward with him, both staying low, breathing slow and controlled. When they reached the victim, Ron could see the shape better. Teenager, maybe 16. Thin, hoodie drawn up, soot smeared across the side of his face. Still breathing, but shallow. "Got him," Ron said. He lifted the kid's shoulders while Dylan pulled his legs clear. The boy let out a small, panicked sound, half awake but not tracking anything. Ron felt that old instinctive shift inside him, the part that always kicked in when someone was scared and hurt, and the clock was running too fast. "We're moving out," Ron said. "Bravo side, stay low." They started back the way they came, but the building wasn't waiting. A deep thud rippled through the ceiling. Something heavy dropped near the center of the warehouse, kicking up a wave of heat that pushed toward them like wind. Maria called out, voice sharp now. "Engine 14 Interior, you need to pull out now. Roof's compromised." Ron already knew. The air felt different, pressurized, angry. "We're coming," he said, 30 seconds. But the route they'd taken in was already worse. Smoke pressed down. The temperature was climbing in uneven waves. Not a flashover, but the kind of chaotic buildup you got in a building that was decaying under fire. Dylan hesitated for half a second. Ron caught the movement. "Stay with me," Ron said. "Eyes on my boots. Nothing else." They moved as one, each step careful. Ron carried the kid over one shoulder, shifting his weight to keep from slipping on debris that hadn't been there minutes earlier. Another groan. Louder. More strained. They reached the hallway that led toward the exit, only to find it half-blocked. A beam had come down across the path, leaving just enough space to crawl underneath if you steadied it. Ron stared for one quick second. He didn't like the way the beam sat, angled, still warm, creaking softly. But there was no alternate route. He set the kid down gently. "Dylan, you slide him under. I'll hold this up." Dylan looked at the beam, then at Ron. "Cap, do it," Ron said, already getting his shoulder under the lowest point. "Quick and clean." Dylan dropped to his stomach, pulled the kid toward him, and started sliding him through the gap. The beam flexed under Ron's weight, not enough to fall but enough to complain. His shoulder burned, sweat rolled down his neck inside the collar of his coat. "Almost," Dylan said, voice tight. The kid's shoes scraped across debris. Then Dylan had him through. "Go," Ron said. "Get him clear. I'm right behind you." Dylan hesitated again, rookie instinct wanting to stay with his captain. Ron met his eyes, the mask's lens reflecting orange glow. "Move," Ron said. Dylan obeyed. He grabbed the kid under the arms and dragged him down the corridor toward the exit. Ron lowered himself, keeping pressure off the beam as he eased under. Halfway through, the building gave off another deep buckle. and the beam dropped an inch, grinding against concrete. He slid out fast, rolled, and pushed himself to his feet. The corridor ahead pulsed with heat, smoke boiling. He caught up with Dylan just before the exit door, both of them half stumbling in the thickening haze. Maria was there, pulling the kid out as soon as they emerged. Fresh air hit Ron like a splash of cold water, but it didn't last long, because the moment they cleared the threshold, a portion of the roof caved in behind them, sending flames blasting out of the side door they'd just escaped. The sound was a dull, ripping collapse. A plume of embers shot upward. "Jesus," Dylan said, breath shaking. Ron didn't answer. He was busy scanning the building, lungs pulling hard against the mask. He knew how close that had been. Too close. Medics rushed the kid toward an ambulance. The boy was conscious now, but disoriented, eyes blinking against the sunlight. Ron hoped he'd make it. Hard to tell. Smoke inhalation from plastic fires could turn fast. Maria walked over. "You all right?" Ron nodded. "We're good." But he could still feel the tremor of the beam against his shoulder, the weight of the building deciding whether or not to bury them. Battalion 3 radioed an order. All companies defensive. No one else was going inside. Ron stood back with the crew, watching flames punch through the roof. Retirement didn't feel close anymore. It felt like something he'd imagined on a quiet morning, in a different life. The warehouse was fully involved within minutes. Flames pushed through the roof in long, angry waves, each collapse feeding the next. Ron stood with the rest of Engine 14 behind the tape line, face still marked with soot, turnout coat open at the collar. His breathing had steadied, but his body hadn't caught up yet. His muscles were in that post-adrenaline state, still ready to move even though the danger had passed. Dylan sat on the tailboard of the engine, helmet at his feet, head down. Maria checked on him twice, each time giving him space a rookie sometimes needed after a close call. Ron walked over. "You did good in there," he said. Dylan nodded slowly. "Didn't feel like it. You kept your head. That's what matters." The kid looked up at him, eyes still wide with that aftershock look every firefighter got the first time a building tried to kill them. "I thought that beam was gonna come down on you." Ron didn't sugarcoat it. "It almost did." Dylan swallowed hard. "But you made the right call," Ron continued. "You got the victim out, you didn't freeze. That's the job." It seemed to help a little. Dylan straightened his shoulders. Off to the side, Battalion 3 oversaw the transition to defensive operations. Tower ladders pumped water from above, streams arching over the roofline. Crews rotated out, some grabbing water bottles, others changing air cylinders in case conditions changed. But the fire wasn't giving anything back. The structure was too far gone. An ambulance door slammed nearby. The medics had stabilized the teenager and were prepping transport. Ron watched the kid for a moment, pale oxygen mask tight across his face, soot staining his hair. His chest rose and fell at a steady pace. Better than before. A medic walked by and caught Ron's eye. If you hadn't gotten to him when you did, he wouldn't have made it. Ron didn't say anything. He gave a small nod, the kind you gave when the truth hit hard in its simplicity. The heat from the fire radiated across the lot, warm enough to feel on bare skin even from a distance. The air smelled of melted plastic, sharp chemical, coating the back of the throat. Ron had smelled that before, years ago, at another plastics plant fire. Same quick spread, same sense of a building turning on itself. Maria joined him at the edge of the tape. "Command says overhaul's gonna take a while once it's safe. We'll probably be here most of the afternoon." Ron didn't mind. He wasn't in a hurry to get back to the station. The adrenaline still ran too high to settle into routine. They watched as another section of the roof folded inward, sending a burst of sparks into the air. Tower 9 knocked it down from overhead. Maria glanced at him. "You sure you're good?" Ron flexed his shoulder. It was sore, but manageable. "Just a bruise, nothing more." "You scared the hell out of Dylan. He'll get over it." "He looks up to you," she said. Ron didn't respond. He kept his eyes on the fire. Time passed in slow chunks. Radio updates, adjustments in attack lines, crews rotating for rehab checks. Eventually, the fire darkened down enough for companies to start mop-up on the exterior. No interior operations. Too unstable. Ron finally took a seat on a folding step near the engine. Sweat had dried on his neck, leaving a tacky layer of grit. He pulled off his gloves and rested his hands on his knees. He thought about retirement again. He didn't feel shaky or emotional about what happened. It was just familiar. Fires got unpredictable, buildings collapsed. You made calls, some cut it close. That was the job, always had been. But the closeness of it, how quickly the situation had turned, felt like a reminder delivered with purpose. Not dramatic, not poetic, just factual. You didn't get to pick your last fire. The job picked it for you. After an hour, they finally cleared the scene. The warehouse was a charred skeleton half sunken into its own footprint. Police taped it off for investigators. The sun had pushed through the earlier clouds, leaving the sky a washed-out blue. Back at the station, the mood lifted slightly. They cleaned gear, restocked tools, rinsed off soot. Dylan hovered near Ron while deconning his mask, like he wasn't sure if he should keep talking or stay quiet. Ron finally broke the silence. "Go grab lunch. You're running on fumes." Dylan gave a tired grin. "Yes, Cap." Once the bay settled into its usual rhythm, Maria approached Ron again. She leaned against a counter, arms crossed. "You know," she said, "you've got one shift left. Maybe take it easy tomorrow." Ron cracked a faint smile. "Hasn't worked so far. Worth a try." He knew she meant well, but he also knew the truth. You didn't get easy days just because you were retiring. Late afternoon rolled in. The crew relaxed, gear drying on racks, helmets lined in a row along the bench. Ron sat at the kitchen table with a fresh cup of coffee, staring at nothing in particular. The burn of the day lingered in his muscles, but his mind was settling. He didn't realize how tired he was until Maria's voice came from the doorway. "Battalion just called. They want you to stop by headquarters tomorrow morning before your shift. Something about paperwork." Ron sighed. "Nothing's ever straightforward." "Nope," she said, "but you'll be out of here soon." He nodded, though something about the afternoon sat unevenly inside him, a weight he couldn't shake. He chalked it up to the close call, but tomorrow's shift would prove that the job wasn't finished with him yet. Ron woke early the next morning, before his phone alarm had the chance. His shoulder ached from the beam the day before, but it wasn't anything he hadn't worked through before. He moved slowly, stretching the stiffness out as the bedroom filled with the first thin line of daylight. His wife, Karen, stirred when she heard his boots on the floor. "You all right?" she murmured. "Yeah," he said softly. "Just getting moving." She watched him pull on his clothes, station t-shirt, worn duty pants. He'd done this routine thousands of times, but today it carried a different weight. Last shift. Last time packing up the lunch she always left in the fridge. Last drive to Station 14 in the early quiet of their street. "Be safe," she said, like she said every morning he worked. Always. He kissed her forehead before heading out. The air smelled of wet leaves and distant traffic. Nothing dramatic, just the city waking up again. The drive to the station took 7 minutes, same as always. The familiar brick building came into view, engines still parked in their overnight spots, bay lights glowing faintly. Ron pulled into his usual space, grabbed his bag, and stepped inside. The crew was in various stages of waking up, coffee brewing, someone clattering pans in the kitchen, radio chatter low in the background. They greeted him with the easy warmth of routine, no fanfare. Ron appreciated that. Maria approached him near the watch desk. "Morning. Headquarters wants you at 9. Shouldn't take long." "Paperwork?" She shrugged. "Something like that. Chief Daniels didn't give details." Ron didn't read into it. Chiefs loved last-minute formality. He set his gear at his locker, checked his SCBA, swapped out a cracked flashlight mount. Normal start-of-shift tasks. His shoulder protested when he reached up, but he ignored it. At 8:40, he headed to headquarters in the station SUV. The building was only a few blocks away, Administrative offices, training rooms, meeting spaces. He'd spent countless hours there over the years, usually for training updates or to give reports. Chief Daniels met him in the hallway outside her office. She gave him a tired smile. "Ron, thanks for coming in." "What's going on?" he asked. "Nothing bad. Just something we needed to run by you before you sign your final retirement packet." She motioned him into the office. A folder sat on her desk, a couple of formal printouts, a photo clipped to the corner. He recognized the kid from yesterday, the teenager they'd pulled out of the warehouse. Daniels sat down. The boy's name is Tyler Briggs, 17. Lives with his mom in the Riverside apartments. Been couch hopping lately. School says he's been struggling. Ron kept his hands on his knees, unsure where this was heading. He regained full consciousness last night. Daniels continued. Told investigators he wasn't squatting. Said he went into that warehouse because he thought he heard someone else inside. Ron frowned. Someone else? That's what he claims. Says he heard a man yelling. Couldn't find him. Smoke got too thick. He got turned around. Ron stayed silent, waiting. Daniels opened another file. Investigators found some evidence of forced entry on the far Bravo side. Different door than the one you made entry through. Could have been old, Ron said. Could have been. But the kid described hearing the voice about 20 minutes before the fire was reported. Ron crossed his arms. We would have found someone if they were inside. Daniels gave a small nod, acknowledging the logic. Most likely he was disoriented. Smoke does strange things to the senses, but we have to follow up. It's protocol. Ron didn't like where this was going. What does that have to do with me? Daniels slid a form across the desk. We need an addendum to your report. Nothing major. Just confirming your search path, where you encountered the victim, whether you saw or heard anything that suggested a second person. Ron studied the form. Straightforward questions. Nothing complicated. But there was something else in Daniels's expression. Something she hadn't said yet. What's the real concern? He asked. She exhaled slowly. Building inspectors flagged that warehouse years ago. The owner ignored repairs. The city's worried someone might latch onto the idea that a second victim was missed because the building was too dangerous to enter thoroughly. Ron leaned back, understanding now. They're worried about liability. They're worried about politics, Daniels corrected. And timing. The mayor's office is already asking questions. Ron rubbed his jaw. He'd lived through enough cycles to know how these things went. A fire turned into a headline, then into finger-pointing. Daniels softened her tone. I'm not asking you to change anything. Just document what you saw. If you heard nothing, write that. If you found no signs of another victim, write that. Ron nodded once. All right. He filled out the form with slow, deliberate handwriting. He described the entry route, the victim's location, conditions inside. He noted that visibility was near zero, that the building was already in structural failure before they exited, and he wrote the truth. He had not heard any other voices in the warehouse besides the teenager's cough. When he was done, he slid the form back across the desk. Daniels skimmed it, nodded. Good. That's all we needed. He stood to leave, but before he reached the door, Daniels said, Ron. He looked back. You've still got one shift left. Don't carry yesterday's fire into the rest of your day. Ron gave a small, tired smile. Wasn't planning to. He stepped into the hall, heading for the exit, but her last sentence stuck with him longer than it should have, because despite the neatness of the paperwork, something about yesterday's fire didn't feel closed, and before the day was over, that unease was going to find him again. Ron drove back to Station 14 with the paperwork conversation turning over in his head. He wasn't bothered by the politics. After 35 years, he'd learned not to waste energy on that. But the kid's statement kept snagging in his thoughts. Hearing someone else inside, a man yelling. Ron had been in that warehouse. He knew the sound of a structure talking under fire, metal groaning, air currents shifting, furniture collapsing. Smoke made voices out of nothing sometimes. Still, Something felt unfinished. The station was in full midday rhythm when he returned. Someone was chopping vegetables for lunch. A couple firefighters were cleaning hose on the apron. The engine bay smelled faintly of detergent and diesel. Normal, comfortable. Maria walked over as soon as he stepped inside. "How'd it go?" "Paperwork," Ron said. "Nothing dramatic." She studied him like she wasn't entirely convinced. He changed the subject. "Anything quiet while I was gone?" "Few medical calls, nothing big." Ron nodded. He hung up his jacket, checked his radio battery, and joined the crew in the kitchen. Lunch was simple: chicken, rice, something green. He wasn't especially hungry, but he ate anyway. Dylan sat across from him, acting more relaxed than yesterday, though Ron could still see the leftover tension in the way he tapped his foot. "You good?" Ron asked him quietly. Dylan shrugged. "I've been replaying yesterday a little." "That's normal," Ron said. "Replay it. Learn from it, then let it go." Dylan nodded, breathing out slowly. "You ever stop replaying things?" Ron didn't pretend. "Some calls stick, even decades later." They both went quiet. Not awkward, just honest. After lunch, the station settled into that soft, early afternoon lull. Crews cleaned up. Paperwork got done. Someone tossed a football in the bay. Ron sat at the watch desk reviewing inspection forms. His shoulder ached again, deeper now, but he ignored it. At 2:11 p.m., the tones dropped. "Engine 14, Truck 7, Battalion 3. Respond to reported residential fire. 1124 Oak Hill Court. Caller reports smoke from the attic. Multiple calls coming in." Maria's head lifted immediately. "That's close." Ron was already up. He grabbed his coat, clipped his radio, and headed for the engine. The calm he'd felt all day evaporated under the familiar focus that always arrived with structure fires. The drive took barely 3 minutes. Oak Hill Court was a small cul-de-sac with modest houses and neatly trimmed yards. As they turned in, Ron saw smoke curling from the eaves of a single-story home. Light gray, drifting upward in a steady plume. Not explosive, but not harmless either. Neighbors stood in clusters on the lawn. A woman waved the engine down. "I think someone's still inside. The guy who lives there, he didn't come out." Ron stepped off the engine. Where was he last seen? In the garage, maybe 10 minutes ago. He was working on something. A garage fire with attic involvement. That could get ugly fast. Maria radioed their arrival. "Engine 14 on scene, smoke showing, possible occupant still inside." Dylan pulled the line. Ron masked up and led the approach toward the attached garage. The door was half open, jammed at an angle. Smoke seeped through the gap in steady pulses. Ron crouched and called out, "Fire department, call out if you can hear us." No answer. Inside, visibility was limited. The smoke was denser here, drifting in thick sheets from overhead. Ron swept the thermal camera. A bright white bloom pulsed in the ceiling, the fire moving through the attic space. "Entry through the garage," Ron said. "We'll do a quick primary." Dylan nodded, already feeding hose through the doorway. They moved inside, staying low. Tools on the workbench glinted faintly. Boxes, paint cans, a bike hanging crooked from the rafters. Normal garage clutter. They reached the interior door leading into the kitchen. It was cracked open an inch. Smoke pushed through it. Ron pressed a gloved hand against it. Warm. He swept the thermal camera toward the kitchen. Cooler zone appeared in the far corner. Maybe a hallway, maybe just the shape of cabinets. Then he noticed something else, a faint heat outline near the floor. Not hot enough to be fire, about the size of a person. "Maria, I've got a possible target," Ron said. "Kitchen area, left side." Maria joined them. She pulled the door open fully. Smoke pushed out in a swirling rush. Ron went in first. The smoke was heavier in here, low visibility but navigable. The flame front hadn't dropped into the living space yet, but the attic fire was growing fast. He moved toward the shape he'd seen. As he got closer, the thermal camera clarified it. Someone was on the floor, lying on their side near the lower cabinets. "Victim found," Ron said. They rolled the man onto his back. Mid-50s, heavy-set, unconscious. No burns visible, but his breathing was shallow and fast. Classic smoke inhalation. "We're taking him," Ron said. Dylan helped lift him under the arms, dragging him toward the garage entry. They made good progress until a sudden crack sounded overhead, loud enough to vibrate the walls. Ron looked up. A patch of ceiling sagged, glowing faintly around the edges. "Move! Get him out, now!" They pulled the man through the doorway just as the section of ceiling gave way. Burning insulation and wood dropped into the kitchen, filling the space with instant heat. Maria keyed up on the radio. Interior conditions deteriorating, pulling out with one victim. They dragged the man into the driveway. Medics rushed to meet them. Neighbors backed away as flames licked from the garage roofline. Ron stepped into fresh air, lungs pulling hard. His mask felt tight. He shut off his air supply and pulled the facepiece away. The medics were already working on the homeowner. Oxygen, quick vitals, prepping transport. Dylan leaned on his knees, catching his breath. That came down fast. Ron nodded. Attic fires always do. Battalion 3 arrived and began coordinating suppression, while Engine 14 cooled the garage. Truck 7 opened the roof where it was safe. The fire didn't spread beyond the attic, but it took effort to stop it before it reached the main living area. Through it all, Ron kept scanning the scene. That old unease from the warehouse fire had crept back in, sitting in his chest like a stone. He couldn't explain why. The operations were normal. The rescue had gone well, but something about the last 24 hours felt connected. Not in a dramatic way, just in the low, steady instinct that had kept him alive for decades. After they knocked down the fire and crews began overhaul, Maria walked up to him. "You all right?" she asked. Ron wiped sweat from his forehead. "Yeah, just thinking." "About yesterday?" "About both," he admitted. She nodded slowly. "You think the kid was right? About someone else in that warehouse?" Ron didn't answer right away. The question hung there in the warm, smoky air. "I don't know," he said finally, "but something doesn't feel settled." Maria gave him a long look, not worried, just reading him the way experienced firefighters read each other. "Let's get back," she said. "Long day." They loaded up the engine. As Ron climbed into the officer's seat, he glanced once more at the house, watching the smoke thin into the afternoon sky. His last shift wasn't done with him yet. They were halfway back to the station when the radio crackled again. "Battalion 3 to Engine 14. When you're clear, return to headquarters. Fire Investigations wants to speak with Captain Mercer about yesterday's incident." Maria glanced over. "You good to handle that now?" Ron nodded, though the request pressed on him more than it should have. "Yeah, I'll swing by." They dropped the rest of the crew at the station. Dylan hopped off last, giving Ron a quick, uncertain wave. Ron returned it before climbing back into the SUV alone. The drive to headquarters felt heavier than the morning trip. Late afternoon traffic, sun angled low, long shadows across the pavement. Ron had worked through enough investigations in his career to know they usually moved slowly. Questions, timelines, diagrams. This didn't feel like that. This felt like someone was trying to get ahead of something before it spread. He parked in the visitor lot and headed inside. The hallway leading to Fire Investigations was quiet, except for the hum of fluorescent lights. 2 investigators, Ramirez and Colt, waited in a small conference room. He knew both. Solid guys. Straightforward. They greeted him the way firefighters did when things were serious. Calm voices, measured nods. "Cap," Ramirez said. "Thanks for coming in." Ron pulled out a chair. "What's going on?" Colt slid a printout across the table. "This is from the security camera of a business 2 blocks from the warehouse. Angle's rough quality isn't great, but look here." The image showed the road behind the warehouse, not the building itself, just the alleyway. A timestamp about 40 minutes before the fire was reported. Ron leaned closer as Colt traced a finger along the grainy footage. "That," Colt said, "is someone walking toward the warehouse. Looks like a man. Hoodie, gloves, can't see the face." Ron nodded slowly. "Could be anybody. Plenty of people move through that area." Ramirez tapped the next printout. This one's from 12 minutes before the 911 call. Same camera, the same person is running the opposite direction. Ron took a moment. The figure was blurred, mid-stride, the way someone looked when sprinting. Something clutched in one hand, maybe a bag, maybe nothing. Running before the fire was reported, Ron said. Doesn't mean he started it. No, Ramirez agreed. But here's the part that connects to what the teenager said. Right before the clip ends, the guy stops. He turns back toward the warehouse. Then he bolts. Ron let out a slow breath. You think the kid heard this guy? We don't know yet. Could have been unrelated. Could have been noise, but we can't ignore it. Colt folded his arms. We're not treating this as arson yet. Just trying to establish who was inside and when. We wanted to ask if you noticed anything during your search. Any signs someone left in a hurry. Tools dropped. Footprints. Anything. Ron shook his head. Visibility was too low. Fire was already deep in the center. If someone was there, they were gone long before we entered. The investigators nodded. They didn't push. They knew the conditions. Ramirez closed the folder. All right. That's all we have for now. But if anything comes back to you, anything at all, call us. Ron stood. I will. He left the building with the same unsettled weight he'd carried all day. Only now it had a shape. Not solid, not clear, but real. Back at the station, the crew was cleaning tools in the bay. Dylan looked more relaxed now, sleeves rolled up, scrubbing soot from the nozzle. Maria saw Ron walk in and headed over. What did they want? They found footage of someone near the warehouse before the fire. Nothing conclusive. You think the kid was right? She asked again. Ron exhaled through his nose. Still not sure. Investigators think arson? They're not saying that, not yet. Maria nodded, thoughtful. Long 24 hours. Ron didn't argue. The rest of the evening was quiet. A couple medical calls, one small auto accident, the kind of city noise Ron had spent a lifetime responding to. By the time they got back around 10 p.m., the station felt calm again. Lights low, coffee pot half full, crew stretched out watching TV or grabbing bites of leftovers. Ron sat at the kitchen table, filling out the last of his daily logs. He couldn't focus. The image of the figure running from the warehouse hung in his head like a half-built puzzle. Something he couldn't see clearly but couldn't ignore. Around 11, most of the crew headed to the bunk room. Maria lingered, checking the apparatus one more time before calling it a night. You sure you're doing okay? She asked from the bay doorway. Ron thought about lying, brushing it off. But he didn't. I keep thinking about what we didn't see in that warehouse, he said quietly. We've both been in fires where things felt wrong. This one, something sticking. Maria nodded. Then trust that instinct. You have it for a reason. He appreciated the bluntness. She wasn't trying to comfort him. She was stating fact. They turned in for the night. The bunk room was dim, quiet except for the soft hum of the HVAC system. Ron settled onto his bed, boots beside him like always. He'd slept in firehouses more years than he wanted to admit. Usually he could fall asleep in minutes. Not tonight. He lay awake, the events looping in his mind, not in a dramatic, cinematic way, just in the technical, methodical rhythm of an old firefighter reviewing a scene and sensing a gap. Somebody ran from that building. Somebody might have been inside before the collapse. Somebody could have been hurt, missed, unaccounted for. He stared at the ceiling, his last shift, his last night on duty. And somewhere out there, maybe in the rubble of a warehouse, maybe walking the streets, was a detail he hadn't put together yet. He finally drifted off, not into rest, but into that shallow, alert sleep firefighters learn. Light enough to wake at a sound, heavy enough to pretend it's rest. The tones would hit soon, he could feel it. The tones dropped at 5:42 a.m. Sharp, urgent, the kind that punched straight through sleep. Engine 14, Rescue 2, Battalion 3, Respond Priority 1. Reported person trapped. Location, 2910 Riverside Industrial Road. Caller states a man is heard yelling inside the collapsed warehouse structure. Ron sat up before the dispatcher finished speaking. Maria was already on her feet across the bunk room. "That's yesterday's address." Dylan's voice came from behind them, groggy but alert. "How's that possible? The building's gone." Ron didn't answer. He didn't need to. Every instinct he had, the same instincts that had been pushing at him since the first fire, tightened fast. Someone had heard yelling. Again. They scrambled into their gear. The bay doors rolled open. The engine roared out into a sky still caught between night and sunrise. The streets were empty, stoplights blinking yellow across intersections. The ride was short, but it felt longer. When they arrived, Ron saw two things immediately. The warehouse was still a smoldering skeleton, blackened beams, partial walls, debris stacked in uneven piles. And standing near the taped perimeter was a man in a reflective road vest, hands shaking, pointing inside. "He's in there," the man shouted. "I heard him. Someone calling for help." Battalion 3 pulled up just behind them. The battalion chief stepped out, hair uncombed, voice already moving into command mode. "Engine 14, we're going to confirm conditions before sending anyone in. The building's unstable." But Ron was already walking toward the fence line. Not rushing, not reckless, just moving like someone who'd felt this coming for 24 hours. Maria followed, staying close. Dylan behind her. The chief caught up. "Ron, hold on. We don't know the source of that call." Ron studied the structure. The fire yesterday had gutted it, but parts of the Bravo side still clung together. Charred framing, pockets of debris, areas where someone could have been trapped without being visible. "Where'd you hear him?" Ron asked the witness quietly. The man pointed again. "Left side, somewhere in the debris, sounded weak, like he couldn't yell loud." Ron didn't look at Maria. Didn't need to. He felt her decision before she made it. "Cap," she said. "We'll go with a 2-person recon. No interior commitment. Strict time limit." The battalion chief sighed, frustrated but realistic. "All right. Mercer, Maria, quick sweep of the Bravo side from the exterior only. No deep entry. If you see anything unsafe, you back out." Ron nodded. "Understood." They masked up. The smoke was lighter than yesterday, thin gray wisps rising from hot spots. The ground crunched under their boots as they moved toward the collapsed section. Dawn light cut across the wreckage, revealing twisted metal, half-melted shelving, and pockets where debris had formed strange little cavities. Ron called out, voice steady. "Fire department, if you can hear us, call out." Silence. They moved across the edge of the collapse. Maria played her light across the rubble. Dylan held the thermal camera, sweeping for any heat signatures that didn't match the lingering hot spots. At first, nothing. Then, Dylan stopped. "Cap, I've got something." Ron stepped beside him. On the screen, between the uneven white shapes of smoldering debris, a cooler form flickered. Not blue like a living person would appear. Something closer to gray. Faint. Still. "Could be nothing," Maria said gently. Ron didn't blink. "Or it's someone we missed." The chief's voice crackled through the radio. "Engine 14, status?" Ron keyed up. "We've got a possible target. Request permission for shallow entry, no more than 10 feet. A pause, a long one. Then, approved. Use extreme caution." Ron didn't wait. He took the lead, stepping carefully through an opening created by fallen beams. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of scorched plastic and wet ash. They had to crouch to avoid leaning structures that could drop with a shift of weight. The thermal camera grew clearer as they approached the cold spot. Maria steadied a light. "It's under that slab." Ron lowered himself, pushing debris aside with gloved hands. The slab was a chunk of collapsed roof panel. Lightweight concrete board fused with insulation. Burned, brittle, but still heavy. He tested it. It shifted an inch. Enough. With Maria bracing the opposite side and Dylan clearing loose debris, Ron lifted the panel just enough to see underneath. And there he was. A man, maybe mid-30s, covered in soot, curled on his side, breathing shallow but breathing, barely conscious, his right leg pinned under a fallen beam. Ron felt something hit him. Quiet, not dramatic, just confirmation. Someone had been in that building, someone they didn't know about, someone the kid had heard. They hadn't missed him during the search. The fire had pushed him deeper, into a space that collapsed minutes later. Pure luck the building hadn't taken him completely. Ron dropped to his knees. "We've got a live victim. Need rescue too with stabilization tools." Maria radioed it in. Her voice was all business, but Ron could see the tension in her shoulders. The man's eyes fluttered. A rasped breath escaped him, dry and broken. Ron leaned close. "You're all right. We've got you. Stay with me." The man blinked slowly, unfocused. "Help! We're here." Rescue 2 arrived fast. They cribbed the beam, lifted it clean, and slid the man onto a backboard. He winced sharply but didn't fully wake. Medics moved in, oxygen ready, vitals already weak but present. As they carried him out, the battalion chief pulled Ron aside. "How the hell did you know?" Ron shook his head. "I didn't. Just didn't feel right leaving it." The chief looked at him for a long second, respect settling in behind the tiredness. "Most guys in their last shift would have played it safe." Ron shrugged. "Wasn't about that." They cleared the scene after sunrise. The man was transported in serious condition but alive. The witness gave a shaky statement. Investigators arrived to take over. Back at the station, the crew was wiped. The shift was minutes from ending, but nobody talked about breakfast or going home. They just sat in the kitchen, quiet, processing. Maria finally looked at Ron. "You ending your career on a double rescue," she said. "Not many get to say that." Ron poured himself a small cup of coffee. His hands were steady again. "Not planned," he said. "Just how it landed." Dylan spoke up next. "Captain, if you didn't push for that recon, that guy would have died in there." Ron didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice was even. "That's why we listen to the things that don't feel settled, even when we can't explain them." The room went quiet again. Minutes later, the off-duty crew arrived to relieve them. Bags were grabbed, gear was stored. Goodbyes were said in low, tired voices. Ron walked out to the parking lot. The sun was fully up now, bright across the hood of his truck. He opened the door, set his bag inside, then paused. He took one last look at Station 14. Brick walls, bay doors, the life he'd lived for decades. He didn't feel triumphant. He didn't feel sad. Just steady. The same way he felt on most mornings when the day had been hard and the work had been real. He got in the truck, started the engine, and drove home. The man pulled from the warehouse survived. Weeks in the hospital, then rehab, then a slow return to normal life. Investigators later confirmed he'd broken in looking for scrap metal, got trapped when a section of storage shelves collapsed, and couldn't crawl out before the fire spread. The teenager, Tyler Briggs, recovered too. He visited Station 14 once, months later, just to thank the crew. He shook Ron's hand and said quietly, "I knew I heard someone." Ron only nodded. Ron's retirement settled into a rhythm. Morning walks, slow coffee, time with Karen. No speeches, no spotlight. Just a life after fire. Every now and then he drove past Riverside Industrial Road. The warehouse was gone. An empty lot remained. He never stopped to look long. Some calls stayed with you. Not because they were dramatic, not because they changed everything, but because they reminded you why the work mattered and why walking away from it was never simple.